Welcome to the Navigator podcast.
Well, welcome to the Navigate podcast. I'd like to introduce Joel Harris. Joel is COO of HP Communications, and we've known each other for about 6 months, but it feels longer than that, Joel. It's like we're kindred spirits from our first conversations on. So appreciate just the way you think and what you do.
Thanks, Brad. Great to be here.
Well, thanks. So what we're going to talk about today is really the predecessor to a blog series that you're interested in writing for us on variable versus fixed costs. And so what intrigues you about that topic? What kind of started that journey?
As a systems integration business, we all talk about our GP, and we buy into the myth of GP that just because we call it direct costs that they become variable. But often, most businesses I work with have a hired staff that they keep permanent staff whether business is up or down. And in our business, we are a seasonal business that sees less revenue in Q1 typically, and with a lot of revenue in Q3. And so what I find when I talk to owners is they say, Joel, we lose money in Q1, but man, we make it up in Q3. And I always ask the question, well, why do you settle for losing money in Q1, and what can we do about that would allow you to increase your profits? So the signal to me that a business has an issue is when you see revenue moving and you see your bottom line moving even more. That would indicate to me that you're not really matching true expenses to your true revenue. Instead, you're carrying a drag of fixed costs through over periods where you have variable revenue.
Got it. And those fixed costs can, again, be your direct labor or your overhead. And a lot of times people confuse fixed costs with overhead.
That's right. That's great. That's a very good point, because you say fixed costs, everybody just assumes you're talking about your indirect costs, your SG&A, your overhead, and they forget that if they're just paying a fixed payroll, regardless if you call it direct costs or up in your GP, before cost of goods sold, that it's not really variable.
Right.
You might as well lose that designation.
And I know that, you've had the opportunity at HP Communications to really work on this. What are some of the trials, the techniques, and the results?
Well, often when I espouse the benefit of using subcontractors or temp agencies to fill out your higher seasonal demand, people say, well, that's great, that makes sense, and they just rush out and they hire somebody to do it. And I've found that manage your variable costs with intention requires a lot of work before you just go do it. I've seen a lot of failures where people listen to the message and say, oh, that's great, I'll go hire a subcontractor. And then that project fails and they say, well, I'll never do that again, because they didn't build the competency to manage those outsourced resources to the same level and degree that maybe they internally manage them through just their normal systems of management. And so building a competency is really required. So what we did at HP in my first year there was I convinced our general managers that we were going to not hire for our summer demand with permanent hires. Instead, we were going to use a mix of subcontractors and temp workers. And so we actually brought in 10 to 12 temp workers, either interns from colleges or for people who are just graduated from the local tech schools, with the commitment that we would then let them go at the end of the summer as we saw our revenues begin to decline. And so we put a plan in place and said, this is how we're going to hire them, this is how we're going to train them, and this is how we're going to know it's the signal that it's time to let them go. And of course, at the end of the summer, what you find is you already had a couple people who had natural attrition, and you need to backfill those. Now you have a pool of 10 to 12 candidates to select your next set of employees from. So step one for me is often just getting people to practice using the idea that you don't have to make a permanent hire every time you have an incremental unit of work that needs to be done to satisfy your customer demand.
Great. Well, and there's a whole set of ramifications from that too. I also don't have to fire a temp employee. It's just, we just let them go as opposed to hire, and then I have to go through all of the pain to let them go. Great.
And you said the agreement up front.
Yeah.
And then there's no surprise.
What are some of the other, I'll say, topics you're going to be dealing with in your blog series?
So basically 3 ideas. What are the situations in which this applies, right? People hear it and then they hear my example and that either applies to them or doesn't apply to them. So one of the things I wanted to do was to expose the breadth of application to this across a variety of situations. There's 3 primary ones. Number 1, seasonality. We talk about it. If your business has any seasonality, you really should investigate how you use subcontractors, temps, or other outsourced labor to allow you to meet your peak demand in season while keeping your costs under control in those low seasons. The second area is growth. All of us have these big opportunistic growth. We have a big project shows up. Some years we have double-digit growth, and we're simply not prepared to achieve that level of growth. And so we have to either forego demand, which is a really hard thing for any of us to do, or we take it on and then we do a lot of damage to our customer base because we're not prepared to take on that extra demand. So growth is the third part of it. And then anytime you need to service outside your footprint is a great way to practice your not hiring permanently to take care of demands that are one-off outside your footprint, any one-off type of business needs that you need to address for your customers without adding permanent staff or flying them all over the country or burning your people out by working crazy hours and overtime to make up for this demand. So those three major categories, but there are, I'll list 12, 15 different situations just to help people see that this is not, this may apply to a lot more situations than they may initially think about.
Great. Well, I look forward to reading them. And speaking of reading, what books are you currently reading that you'd like to share?
So a couple of on business, I've been enjoying a book that you pointed out to me, which is 4DX by Chris McChesney. And that is aligns really wonderfully with my personal philosophy of focus on what's wildly important. If you do that consistently, you achieve outsized business results. And this variable cost would be one of those things that I would suggest might be one of those wildly important things you should focus on if it's not a business practice you have. Personally, I'm reading Just Mercy. It's a fascinating look at our current society and the challenges we have with race across our country.
Great. Well, thank you. Appreciate it very much, and I look forward to reading them.
Thanks, Brad. Have a great day.
Thanks.